Now we see them.
Look at
These pictures, taken by US fighter jets, their high-tech radar systems locked onto objects moving at unearthly speeds and trajectories.
What the hell is that?
Means the US military has UFOs in its sights.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA.
You have the US government saying, look, these things are real.
My gosh.
We would see them in the displays in our jet.
Look at the fly.
The question now seems to be not do they exist, but are they earthly or not?
Something legitimate, serious, physical is out there.
And do they pose a military threat?
We still don't know where these things came from and where they went.
The Pentagon is not alone in asking that question. One of the world's top scientists claims that in 2017, we were visited by an object created by extraterrestrial life.
It would have a profound impact on our future.
Suddenly, a topic that was previously pushed to the fringes of science and into science fiction is being taken very seriously.
Something is going on.
Tonight, incredible revelations. What the US fighter pilots saw.
A dark or gray cube inside a clear sphere.
Our experts investigate the mystery of these modern UFOs.
At least 10 people have told me stories about seeing the exact same thing.
Are they Chinese, Russian, or, dare we ask, the next question?
What's out there? Are we alone?
Good evening, I'm Liz Hayes, and this is Under Investigation. Joining me from Boston, Massachusetts, Ryan Graves, a former US fighter pilot who encountered these unidentified objects from the cockpit of an FA-18 Super Hornet. And Greg Agigian, professor at Penn State University, who is researching the history of the UFO phenomenon. In Adelaide, Associate Professor Alice Gorman, an internationally recognised space archaeologist from Flinders University. In Canberra, Dr. Malcolm Davis, Defence Analyst with the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. And here with me in Sydney, Dr. Jackson Ryan, Science Editor with CNET.
People were startled when they saw 3 flying saucers high over Hollywood Boulevard.
UFOs, extraterrestrials, intelligent life in the universe. It's a decades-old fascination. The stuff of Hollywood.
I'll be right here.
And excitable reporting.
Looked up and gasped.
Gasped, we say.
Prompting theories of alien invasion.
And the obsession of an entire subculture of so-called ufologists.
I've seen orbs, balls of light, moving erratically. I did the math one time. It was about 23,000 miles an hour.
All dismissed by science and the military until now.
Oh my gosh, dude. Wow.
These extraordinary videos, shot by US Navy pilots and released by the Pentagon,
Whoa, it's getting close.
changed everything. Can I start with you, Professor Agigian? What's substantially different, do you think, about these UFO sightings?
Well, I think when it comes to these recent sightings, for me, it's about the fact that the military has come forward and said these are real physical objects. Something serious is out there, and they need to study it, examine it, make sense of it, analyze the data, and go from there.
Malcolm Davis, the fact that the Defence Department in the US has acknowledged this, is that the difference for you?
Yes, that is a key difference. Now you have the US government saying, look, these things are real. We're not sure what they are, but they're real, and we need to investigate them further.
Ryan Graves, you don't doubt for a minute that this is something that is independent and it is a solid mass of some sort.
I have no doubt. That's what the data has showed us, and that's what we've seen with our eyeballs. But there are 4 or 5 of these flying in a formation in front of this larger object. And then they performed a turn The larger object followed. They were very physical, and we were flying very close to them.
And Alice Gorman, your take on this?
What we're seeing reported has so many similarities with UFO reports from the past, but it's not usual to get this straight from the mouth of defence.
Jackson, it's changed the conversation, basically.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Liz. I don't think anyone's actually trying to question the credibility of people like Ryan anymore. It's more about being able to separate the idea that these are real objects from imagined objects from outer space or something like that. And once you're able to do that, credibility isn't even a question anymore.
In the US, on June 25th last year, President Biden's Director of National Intelligence released a report on UFOs using a new code word, UAP, Unidentified Aerial Phenomena. For the first time in history, the US government acknowledged that UFOs are real and present a military threat. Suddenly, UFOs were making headlines across the United States and around the world. The UFOs featured in these remarkable US Navy videos.
We've seen these things at the exact same point in the sky from a number of sensors, from a number of aircraft as well. All of this getting pumped in from our entire strike group.
Ryan Graves was a US Navy test pilot. He and other pilots from his FA-18 fighter squadron encountered UFOs in restricted space off the US Atlantic coast every day for at least 2 years, detected by a number of sophisticated military sensors.
What was very interesting to me was that out of those reports were 11 near misses. For us as aviators, a near miss is a very big deal.
How close is a near miss?
You would define it as maybe within 500 feet would be the technical term.
So that is close.
So what we would see typically on our radars, we would see the actual track file, we call it, where the object is and how fast it's going and what direction. We would see them in the displays in our jet.
Malcolm Davis, would this be the first time that you've not doubted that there's something out there?
Look, it's very clear that these are physical objects. They're real. They're certainly not illusions or imagined.
Defence analyst Dr. Malcolm Davis has studied the US UFO report and military eyewitness accounts. He firmly believes that however extraordinary their technology, these UFOs are man-made.
The fact that these have occurred a number of times in areas where the US military have been undertaking exercises is very interesting, because it does suggest that whatever these objects are, they have an interest in monitoring and observing the ability of the US military to undertake air combat manoeuvring in fast jets.
The intelligence report, based on extraordinary encounters by pilots like Ryan Graves, focused on the threat to US national security.
I don't think it was terribly surprising to see it framed as a threat. I mean, what we have to remember is that the skies above us have been militarized since at least World War I. For instance, in 1947, you have these first sightings of what were at the time called flying saucers. They were instantly thought about in terms of whether or not these pose a threat to national security.
Coming up, what was visually seen was a cube.
That's correct.
A close encounter
We just hadn't seen anything like that before.
with something
That very simply is a threat to us.
that defies explanation.
We still don't know where these things came from and where they went.
That's next on Under Investigation. A top-secret unit within the US Defense Intelligence Agency has been investigating UFOs, which it calls UAPs, Unidentified Aerial Phenomena. Dozens of these objects were witnessed by highly trained Navy pilots and captured on a variety of sensors over the last 20 years. To the Pentagon, they're a security threat, possibly from Russia or China. Others ask the question, are they extraterrestrial? 3 of the unidentified craft detected by the US military and witnessed by military observers were given the names of Tic Tac, Gimbal, and Go Fast. They were captured on video recorded by US Navy pilots.
Drone, bro. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA.
What he saw was a group of these.
Lieutenant Ryan Graves was one of those Navy pilots.
3 to 4 to 5 other vehicles in a formation that appeared like a wedge. We were all going out on a flight together doing an air combat training mission while we were off the coast of Jacksonville, Florida. One of my wingmen went back a little bit earlier, as is normal. And on the return to base, he gained the object on the radar.
Look at that thing, dude.
Ryan flew alongside the aircraft whose nose cone camera recorded this video of the UFO dubbed Gimbal.
My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west.
What's interesting about the gimbal is that we don't see an exhaust. We don't see anything that would indicate that any heat flow is emanating from this object.
Gimbal had no observable flight surfaces or means of propulsion and seemed to be surrounded by an energy field.
We had been dealing with these objects for a long period of time, so we're not surprised to see them out there, but the gimbal was different.
Look at that thing. It's rotating.
It looked different, the shape of it. We just hadn't seen anything like that before.
Given you're a fighter pilot, you're out there, when you see something that doesn't make sense, is that a threat?
You know, a threat means something very specific for us in a very specific scenario. So an unknown aircraft operating in our training space where we're not expecting other aircraft, that very simply is a threat to us. A threat is about uncertainty. It's not about intent.
Ryan's FA-18 Naval Fighter Squadron had just upgraded its radar system and initially wondered if malfunctions might account for the UFOs being picked up. But when the objects were also detected on their aircraft's infrared sensor system called FLIR, which positively identified the objects as solid, the conversation changed.
I think the mood shifted a bit, and that's when we started submitting safety reports, wondering why perhaps some classified program was working in places they shouldn't.
What was the technology that these objects seemed to have that you found astounding?
So these objects would look on our FLIR as if they were cold. So no exhaust plumes, no propellers, no heat radiation. There's a restricted area though, right in this coast area here that we'd see them out in the area as we kind of fly down here.
Ryan and his Navy group initially believed the UFOs they were encountering on a daily basis had to be part of a top-secret military project.
Really, that was the most logical thing for us at that point. We weren't jumping to, some kind of exotic vehicle. Our first assumption was this had to be something that we had and that we, the pilots, didn't know was operating there, but we should have.
The extraordinary flight characteristics of these UFOs included no visible means of propulsion, hypersonic velocity, the ability to change directions instantly, low observability, and trans-medium travel, that is, moving seamlessly between air and water.
What was splash?
I think there's 2 rational explanations for these sightings. First is, it's a US black project that's being tested. And as Ryan said, that the US fighter pilot community should have known if that was the case. But clearly, if there are black project vehicles being tested, then the US Defense Department wouldn't want to make that public.
Defence analyst Dr. Malcolm Davis believes the mystery objects are most likely advanced military aircraft created by a hostile foreign power.
The second rational explanation is that somehow these are foreign-controlled drone technology developed by a major power adversary such as China or Russia. Some sort of breakthrough that we don't know about in terms of maneuverability and aerodynamics, and they want to gather intelligence on US military activities, and so they're testing these things out.
There's no doubt that China, in particular, is developing highly advanced aerial weaponry and aircraft, recently testing a hypersonic missile and displaying this long-range stealth drone.
How dangerous do you think that these objects are then, if they are coming from another country?
Look, if they are coming from China or Russia and somehow they find a way to deploy them to those areas where those objects were sighted, then that's a very serious issue indeed, because it does suggest then that our adversaries have developed some sort of breakthrough technology in terms of propulsion, aerospace engineering and materials science that would enable the sorts of characteristics that Ryan talked about.
If it's a threat, it's likely to be one of surveillance. And of course, this is happening all over the world all the time. Our skies are full of military satellites whose job it is to monitor the military actions of other nations. And our lower skies are full of unmanned aerial vehicles, drones of all kinds. The skies have never been fuller of eyes than they are at this point in time. And yet we still don't know where these things came from and where they went.
Space archaeologist Associate Professor Alice Gorman points out that although these particular UFOs have been verified by the military, their characteristics match other sightings reported over previous decades.
This kind of report of objects in the sky changing direction suddenly, moving at speeds that seem unnatural, going against wind direction, has been a feature reported of UFOs for a very long time, which suggests that whatever this technology is, it has also existed for a very long time without the cover being blown. Then we have two hypotheses. It's of a local terrestrial origin or possibly an extraterrestrial origin, but it has to come from somewhere and it has to go to somewhere.
I think we have to acknowledge something, that virtually every single characteristic of the kinds of things we're now hearing about are things we heard about dating back all the way to the 1940s and 1950s when the whole UFO phenomenon of flying saucers, as they were of course talked about back then, was playing out. So one of the more intriguing questions to ask ourselves is, if this isn't new, are we dealing with the same phenomena?
But just as with UFO sightings in years past, there are still skeptics. Science journalist Dr. Jackson Ryan says despite the US military confirming these latest reports, many say the proof is far from definitive.
One of the complaints, Jackson, seems to be that it's always grainy footage.
Yeah, I mean, it is always grainy footage, and I think part of the issue with having grainy footage is that it is not the most ideal evidence, right? And for instance, with Tic Tac, you've got people who have looked at that footage extensively. If they're from the military, sometimes they say, we can't explain this. Then there's other people who look at it and say, that looks like a distant plane to me. I mean, has Ryan heard those kind of explanations before?
Mm-hmm. The biggest criticism I have about that type of analysis is the fact that that analysis is occurring based on on the videos. These are tools that do very specific jobs in very narrow circumstances. And so what we get from them are low quality because they're doing something they're not designed to do.
While it was easy in the past to write off UFOs as optical illusions and from sources considered dubious, this time the US government confirms the evidence is compelling.
The first time we actually had one of these incidents, it was literally at the entry area to the working point, so at about 10,000 feet.
Their presence has been detected not just on video, but also on highly advanced radar and other military detection systems.
Ryan, you don't doubt for a minute that what is being witnessed in this footage is independent and it is a solid mass of some sort.
I have no doubt. That's what the data has showed us, and that's what we've seen with our eyeballs.
And would you be able to elaborate any more on that?
One of these objects were located at the very entrance to our working area. And so as two of the aircraft from my squadron were flying out to the area, this object, which was parked right at the entrance, essentially flew in between the two aircraft that were going out there. And this was actually the first time that any of the aircrew had seen one of these with their own eyeballs. And they were saying, you know, I almost hit one of those darn things. And their mouths were open. They didn't know what to do at that point.
Coming up,
what the hell is that?
One of these objects went about 20 feet next to their canopy.
the jaw-dropping eyewitness description.
A dark or gray cube inside a clear sphere.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the SA.
There wasn't just one sighting, you know, at least 10 people have told me about seeing the exact same thing.
My gosh.
That's next on Under Investigation. Multiple sightings of UFOs by the US military reporting to a top-secret unit in the Pentagon has reignited debate about what these mysterious objects are and where they came from. US Navy FA-18 fighter pilot Lieutenant Ryan Graves was part of an aircraft carrier group operating off America's Atlantic coast.
We'd see them out in the areas as we kind of fly down here.
He says he and his fellow pilots encountered UFOs on a daily basis for at least 2 years.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the SA.
The UFOs were also seen on advanced radar systems and a range of other detection technology. But it went well beyond detection to astonishing eyewitness encounters.
A dark or gray cube inside a clear sphere.
This detailed description of the UFO was given by dozens of highly trained Navy pilots. And just so I heard it correctly, what was visually seen was a cube, did you say?
That's correct. Our dark gray or black cube, where the point of the apex of the cube were touching that kind of inner surface of the sphere.
Can I ask, the sphere, did it seem to be solid, or did it seem to be translucent, or field of energy, or what? How can you describe the sphere?
It was described to me as a clear sphere, which of course also means that it wasn't perfectly clear because they were able to see it.
And that would tell you what, Malcolm?
It's just curious that you've got a physical cube, which is clearly a non-aerodynamic object, inside a sphere, which could be an aerodynamic object. Why would you have a sphere surrounding a cube, and how would that propel it through the sky? And I'm now getting into speculation, which I really don't want to get into, but some sort of electrogravitic propulsion system, which would be, once again, way beyond what the US has, what China has, what Russia has.
Yeah, and there wasn't just one sighting. At least 10 people have told me about seeing the exact same thing. Even about a year ago, a good friend of mine who's still in the Navy, contacted me, and he just, he was out doing a test, and they had to knock it off because one of these objects went about 20 feet next to their canopy while they're out doing a training mission.
Perhaps the most famous of the videos was the UFO dubbed Tic Tac because of its shape. It was seen dozens of times during naval exercises by the USS Nimitz aircraft carrier group off California in 2004. Including by the commander of the FA-18 squadron on the Nimitz, David Fravor.
So as we're looking down off the right side, the backseater in the other airplane, Jim, says, "Hey, Skipper, do you?" And that's about what he gets out of his mouth. And I go, "What the hell is that?" And then we see this little white Tic Tac, because we're about 20,000 feet above it, and it's going basically north-south and then east-west, north, and it's abrupt. It's very abrupt. So then I go, "Hey, I'm going to go check it out." And the other pilot says, "I'm going to stay up here." And I said, "Yeah, stay up high," because now we get different perspective.
The oval-shaped UFO, approximately 12 meters long, was hovering above a roiling patch of white water.
So I'm coming down, and as I get to 12 o'clock, as the Tic Tac's doing this, it's like it's aware of us, and it just goes bloop, and it kind of points out towards the west and starts coming up. So now it's obviously knows that we're there. Whatever this thing is, it knows that we're there. We watch this thing on a crystal clear day with 4 trained observers, and it just, as it crosses our nose, it accelerates, and literally in less than, probably less than a half second, it just goes and it's gone.
Ryan, what did you make of that?
I have great respect for Dave. Him and I are friends. It's so hard to look at and just be anything other than in awe of what they were able to experience. If you trust what the pilot and the other 3 air crew saw and the radar system saw, then it's just such an exceptional story.
So concerned is the US Defense Department that it has mandated for a more advanced scientific study of the UFOs being encountered by its military pilots.
It said very clearly that the instruments and technologies that have been available up until this point were not suited for researching in any sort of refined, precise way the UAP, the unidentified aerial phenomena. So yes, the next step has been to request additional funding, and among other things, supposedly will be new technologies for that very purpose.
Coming up, are they extraterrestrial?
There is no bigger question than, are we alone?
One of the world's leading scientists weighs in.
Are we the smartest kid on the block?
Why he believes we have visitors from outer space.
He went straight to the most exotic explanation you can think of.
One of the reasons I'm seeking intelligence from space is that I don't often find it here on Earth.
That's next on Under Investigation. The US military has confirmed that UFOs are real.
Oh my gosh, dude. Wow, look at that, man.
That its fighter jets have been buzzed by objects that defy all known flight capabilities.
They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west.
And that highly trained Navy pilots have provided extraordinary eyewitness descriptions.
A dark or gray cube inside a clear sphere. There are 4 or 5 of these flying in a formation in front of this larger object.
The UFOs encountered by Lieutenant Ryan Graves and dozens of US Navy pilots and seen across a range of advanced military detection systems produced a stunning admission by the Pentagon that there are inexplicable objects in the sky. Objects that many outside the military immediately wanted to call extraterrestrial, and proof that we're not alone in the universe.
Of course, there's going to be speculation about what's out there. Are we alone? I, for one, do not believe for a second that humanity is the only intelligent life in this universe. But the laws of physics tell us that it's very, very difficult to get across interstellar distances. And I'm not seeing any extraordinary evidence to change my mind that these things aren't terrestrial in origin.
Ryan Graves, when you were growing up, before you became a pilot, did you think about UFOs, and did you have a view, and has any of that changed?
I have to assume that every little kid looks up and wonders if there's someone else out there. I was no different, certainly. Life has a funny way of making you pay attention sometimes.
And it's certainly got your attention now.
It does.
So do you feel stigmatized at all, advancing any of your thoughts publicly?
From my perspective, this is a very pragmatic thing for me. People I know are flying big, expensive aircraft, and they're almost hitting things. So, skepticism is the least of my concern.
The time has definitely come to discuss objects near Earth that may represent equipment from other civilizations.
As one of the world's most respected astrophysicists, Harvard professor Avi Loeb is putting his reputation on the line, pushing his belief UFOs could be evidence of extraterrestrial life.
The report that was delivered to Congress about unidentified aerial phenomena was important in the sense of providing statements that some of the objects were detected by multiple instruments. They were seen by multiple military personnel. At that point, it became clear to me that scientists should engage and figure out the nature of these objects.
Professor Loeb's own research has concentrated on a strange object filmed by the world's highest definition astronomical camera at the Pan-STARRS Observatory in Hawaii. They named the mysterious object Oumuamua, roughly translating as scout in Hawaiian.
Astronomers thought that it's just a rock, it's a comet or an asteroid coming from another star.
On film, it exists only as a brief light trail, but astronomical data revealed its speed and trajectory seems to defy physics.
There were more and more peculiar facts about this object. As it was tumbling, every 8 hours, the amount of sunlight reflected from it changed by a factor of 10, and that meant that it has a very extreme shape. And then I thought to myself, well, if it's very thin, nature doesn't make such objects. Perhaps it's artificial in origin.
Professor Loeb found that Oumuamua accelerated away from the sun. Impossible, he says, unless it was somehow being propelled. Then came his bombshell. In the wake of the UFO videos released by the US military, he proposed that Oumuamua was possibly a huge solar sail that could have been the propulsion system for an alien spacecraft. He knew his theory would shock, but he wanted to shake up his colleagues. And he did.
If we find that an object like Oumuamua is a technological relic from another civilization, that would have a huge impact on society. And obviously, scientists would ask for extraordinary evidence, but such evidence would never be found if the search is not funded.
Alice, how do you view what Avi Loeb is saying?
I think it's really interesting, the hypothesis that this is a solar sail made by an extraterrestrial intelligence that has just flitted through our solar system. But Professor Loeb has the same data and information as all the other scientists who've been investigating. And I don't think the evidence supports it when I read my astronomical colleagues' work.
Yeah, I would agree with what Dr. Gorman is saying, but I would add that I think as an academic, an astronomer from Harvard University, he has been able to play a really unique role here. And in fact, he has increasingly tried to advocate for scientists and academics in general to take the UFO phenomenon more seriously and to try to, in fact, drum up sponsorship for research along these lines.
Well, I think it's an obligation of science to clear up the fog on topics that are of great interest to society. And there is no bigger question than, are we alone? Are we the smartest kid on the block?
It is an unavoidable and inevitable question that has come from the UFO debate opened up by the US military videos. And Australia is part of an international joint venture in search of the answer. A square-kilometre radio telescope array has been built here to conduct space research, including the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, known as SETI.
SETI's goals are essentially, I guess, trying to find alien civilizations, and that is a legitimate endeavour, and it's one that will hopefully answer one of the biggest questions we have, which is, are we alone?
And Professor Avi Loeb has announced the Galileo project, a telescope array searching for other objects like Oumuamua.
One of the reasons I'm seeking intelligence from space is that I don't often find it here on Earth. And really, I would like the company of more intelligent beings just so that I can learn from them. They could have visited us 1,000,000 years ago. There was nobody around to listen. And it's sort of like saying, nobody's knocking on our door, therefore we have no neighbors.
Coming up,
Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
where did they come from?
That first report was the rare admittance that the government didn't know something.
The UFO debate heats up.
It's very simple for me. UFOs are real. They exist, for sure.
Oh, so it's the secrecy that would concern you.
It's not aliens until it's aliens.
That's next on Under Investigation.
In France, like America, the flying saucer mystery makes headline.
UFOs have been part of popular reporting for over 50 years.
There are some people who claim it's a fact that flying saucers have landed here.
The first known story about a UFO sighting was in 1947.
A local rancher found what he claimed to be a flying saucer that had crashed on his land.
Since 1947, we have received and analyzed between 1,000 and 2,000 reports.
Well, it was round, had lights all the way around it.
It's a subject that was initially taken very seriously.
There were 3 inside the ship.
Then viewed as a joke, hijacked by conspiracy theorists.
The head, it seemed to come directly to the shoulder.
But now, after a name change from UFOs to UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena are the subject of a new US government and military investigation. It's a development welcomed by US Navy test pilot Ryan Graves, whose own encounter with UFOs contributed to the Pentagon report that stunned the world.
You know, that first report was the rare admittance that the government didn't know something. And what we're seeing now is the formulation of a plan in order to figure it out. And I think it's a great step.
And putting cold hard cash behind investigations, I think through to 2026, does that tell you it's serious about this?
It tells me that they're willing to take a look, right? So I see this as a very good first step in order to bring to the table the data that's needed.
This is a major step forward, do you think, Greg?
It's hard to know what all that money is going to buy. How much will be revealed to the public? That we just don't know.
Oh, so it's the secrecy that would concern you.
The concern is always that if this is a purely military venture, then the focus will consistently be on these questions of national security and threats. So the question is, what happens beyond that? Is there going to be something more that's looked at here beyond just simply determining the extent to which these things might be a threat?
And Alice, I presume that you would prefer that it not just be a military investigation.
Well, I want to know too. I want to know as much as anyone else what's going on. So certainly the military has to be involved for obvious reasons, but it would be great to get some space agency or civilian or even community interaction here. There's a wonderful Australian project, Fireballs in the Sky, which asks the public to contribute their observations of meteorites and space junk. So something like that, we could add UAPs or UFOs into that.
There's no doubt we live in interesting times. Just a few years ago, it would have been difficult to have a serious debate on the existence of UFOs backed by military and scientific observations. So, in conclusion, there are 2 questions that may be answered in our lifetimes. Are we alone? And may we have already been visited? Can I get your thoughts on that, Jackson?
Yeah, I mean, it's very simple for me. UFOs are real. They exist, for sure. I also believe that we aren't alone in the universe, and some place in some time we will find signs of ancient life. I think those 2 things are completely separate.
We have to always remember that UFO is a really clumsy category because typically people who operate with it will often lump together a whole bunch of different observations under that category. That said, within that category, yes, I think there's something legitimate and something worthy of investigation. I think the general sense that I have about this is it's not aliens until it's aliens.
I can say that there is no archaeological evidence that aliens have ever visited Earth during the whole history of human existence. But I am very hopeful, particularly that we will find microbial neighbours in the rest of the solar system, and I'm personally pinning my hopes on Venus.
Yeah, look, I think statistically it's almost impossible to suggest that we're the only intelligent life in the universe. The universe is vast with trillions and trillions of galaxies. So I think it's highly likely that at some point we will find evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence. So on the question of are we alone, I think the answer is almost certainly no. Have we been visited? Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And so far, I'm not seeing extraordinary evidence that we have been visited.
All right. The final word to you, Ryan. What message do you think is important for all of us when it comes to keeping our minds open to what we're trying to make sense of out there?
I'll offer one small pushback, which is, I think extraordinary claims require the same amount of proof as any other claim, right? There's no special magic proof that is required. Have we been visited or not? I don't know. I do think, though, we are going to figure it out.
And if somebody sees something that doesn't make sense, you would encourage them to speak up?
Of course. Of course. We can't be afraid of the things that are right in front of us.
Well, listen, I want to thank you all very much for this conversation. It's a conversation I think some years ago we thought we may never have. And I appreciate all your views. And I thank you for joining me as well. I'm Liz Hayes. Good night. Hello, I'm Liz Hayes, and thank you for watching Under Investigation. Subscribe to our channel now for exclusive clips, and don't miss out on full episodes of Under Investigation on 9Now and the 9Now app.